Hello, my name is Morgan. Welcome back to my channel. I'm doing my PhD in theater and performance studies, and I'm specifically writing on juggling. So another big aspect of my research is within the field of circus studies. If you want to learn more about what I think about in this area, you can head over to my friend Dawn's YouTube channel, where she has archived a talk that we gave at the Circus and Its Others conference last year. Or you can log on to Circus Talk, where I recently published a little article about what I'm thinking about in my current research. Links for those will be in the description box below. In this video though, with back to school in mind, I wanted to give you a bit of a contemporary circus reading list. This list is going to introduce you to contemporary circus, its history, its theory, and also how artists and scholars are thinking about contemporary circus today. Maybe you're starting circus school this fall and you want a bit of a deeper insight into how scholars are thinking about your artistic practice. Or maybe you're going into your fourth and final year of a theater program and you want to pitch an independent study about circus to your supervisor. Or maybe you're just in the mood for some learning this September and you want to know more about the current circus landscape. Whatever the case may be, I have included titles on this list that will appeal to every viewer. I've decided to break it up into beginner, intermediate, and advanced circus texts, where the beginner books are more accessible to a general public audience that has no prior knowledge of circus and are a lot more accessible and inexpensive. The intermediate books give more of an overview of the field, and they might focus on how the field has emerged in particular regions of the world or within particular artists' mindsets. And finally, the advanced circus texts I'm including are more challenging to find, are maybe more expensive, are maybe more hyper-focused on a particular aspect of circus, like a particular company or a particular scholarly discussion. So those ones are for the more serious circademics and circus book collectors. But obviously, any of you might find any of these books interesting. So I hope you stick around and drop your favorite circus books in the comment section below. Before I get into the list itself though, I do want to explain some of the jargon that I've already used in this video, specifically what I mean by contemporary circus and what other types of circus exist that I'm leaving off of this book list. So for me, circus history can be divided into approximately 3 eras. The first one being the traditional or modern circus from 1768 until about the 1960s. And this is maybe what most people think of when they think of circus. There were animals, there were short distinct acts, circus was kept within families. And then from the 1960s till about the 1990s, we get what I'm calling new circus or nouveau cirque. The hallmarks of the new circus are the removal of animals and the introduction of other art forms into the circus arts. And finally, circus within the past 20 years or so is what I'm calling contemporary circus. And the contemporary circus is marked by its explicit contestation of the values of the traditional circus and its drive to question the boundaries of form, as well as the separation of the circus disciplines from each other. So now you might find circus shows dedicated to a very particular circus discipline, like juggling, which is the one that I'm most interested in, of course. And that juggling show is going to ask the question, what is juggling? What can juggling be? And of course, there are many exceptions to these like circus eras, because there are many traditional circuses still operating today. There are some new circus companies that transitioned into contemporary circus companies, and there were performances happening in the 60s that we might look back at now and call contemporary circus based on style. In general, though, this list focuses on publications from the past 10 years or so that are focusing on circus that's happening in the past 20 or 30 years or so. So let's kick it off with some beginner texts. This first book is by far the cheapest and most accessible option. You can find it on Amazon for less than $15. It is The Ordinary Acrobat by Duncan Wall, subtitled A Journey into the Wondrous World of the Circus, Past and Present. With this book, Duncan Wall continues the tradition of the circus memoir, but in a contemporary context. And Wall didn't really have a relationship with the circus growing up, except when his father forced him to go to the circus, which confused him entirely because, as he writes, I had video games with motion capture graphics. That was entertainment. The circus felt like some previous generation's idea of fun. So Wall didn't actually become fascinated with the circus until a school trip to Paris, when they had to go on a couple cultural excursions. And he became so enamored with contemporary circus while he was there that he applied applied for and received a Fulbright fellowship to go and study at the National Circus School in France. So this book is a documentation of his time there. I would recommend it to literally anyone because it is the story of someone who knows nothing about circus, heading deep into the world of circus in France and becoming a circus insider. Wall talks about each circus discipline separately, which is fitting because the separation of circus disciplines is kind of a hallmark of the contemporary circus. And juggling as a circus discipline is probably the discipline that has developed its own culture and community outside of the circus in the most expansive and robust way. And Wall dedicates 3 chapters just to juggling in this book, which I really appreciated. He speaks to giants in the field. He talks about the culture, the community, the technique, the training, the history, the philosophy, the different movements within juggling history as it transitioned from entertainment to art to sport to hobby to mathematics and so on. So if you want a comprehensive but still entertaining introduction to circus history, training, and performance, look no further than The Ordinary Acrobat by Duncan Wall. If, on the other hand, you're new to circus and you actually want to get your hands dirty with it and give it a try, then I highly recommend Juggling, What It Is and How to Do It, a not-so-brief introduction to the world's most underrated pastime by Tom Wall, with sections written by Benjamin Domask, Jay Gilligan, and Fritz Grobe. This book comes out of Tom Wall's own publication, The Modern Vaudeville Press, and I recommend going to their website and browsing through their other titles as well. After reading this book, I was so motivated to build up my 5-ball endurance that in about 3 sessions after reading the book, I upped my 5-ball endurance from about 13 to 18 seconds up to 60 seconds. Tom and his co-writers teach you absolutely everything you need to know about juggling to get started in it, including notation, terminology, training regimens, prop making, trick creation, act creation, and all in a very approachable tone of voice that will alone give you insight into the culture of juggling. So if you want to dip your toes into circus yourself, because really the best way to understand circus is to give it a go, then juggling is the fastest and most accessible way to do that. Pick up some rocks off the side of the road or some oranges at your local grocery store and find your local juggling club and read this book. Let's move now into the intermediate book section. We are starting off with a real bang here. This book is just chef's kiss, and that is Contemporary Circus, edited by Katie Lavers, Louis Patrick Leroux, and John Burt. This book is a series of interviews with contemporary circus creators, and it seeks to include the artist's own voices within the scholarship of contemporary circus. It is divided into 4 main parts. First, the apparatus in contemporary circus, also called contesting mastery, politics in contemporary circus, also called contesting the normate, performers in contemporary circus, also called contesting prowess, and new work in contemporary circus, also called contesting the circus act. So you can really tell this is a contemporary circus book because every chapter is dedicated to what traditional value they are contesting in the artist's work. In general, in the compilation of these interview snippets, the interviewees and the editors work to undo the myth of the white, male, able-bodied, heteronormative human dominance over nature that was put forward in the traditional circus. So within this book, interviewees ask questions like, when is an object considered unjuggleable? How do audiences respond differently to a man in a dress versus a man in drag versus a bearded woman? And how can innovation within circus occur if new artists are trained solely in the rigorous but conventional physical prowess necessary to work in the existing circus market? Although those questions might sound hyper-academic, I found this text actually very approachable and engaging. There are very few other places where you're going to get this number of circus professionals offering varied and cutting-edge answers to these fascinating questions. Even if you know nothing about circus, this book features some interviews with people or companies that you may have heard of, including Philippe Petit, who is the wire walker who illegally walked between the Twin Towers, or Mike Finch, the CEO and artistic director of Australia's Circus Oz for over 17 years. Personally, I was particularly excited by the juggler and computer scientist Adrian Mondeau in this book. He creates these like digital virtually projected landscapes for circus artists to perform on. That interview for me really provoked questions about the nature of an apparatus and the relationship between what we typically call the real versus the virtual, and how the circus can help make the virtual real. I also really enjoyed the interviews with Fia Maynard, who is a transgender juggler who realized that even though the audience is sort of like watching a juggler on stage, waiting for them to fail, to drop the balls, they also always want them to be adding one more ball in this sort of unsustainable trajectory of mastery. So she decided to end that cycle in her own practice by investigating unjuggleability. She put down her white silicone bouncing balls and instead picked up a cactus. This was a super enjoyable read. I didn't want it to end, honestly. I hope they come out with a sequel. Next up, we have a book dedicated to discussing circus in a Canadian context, and that is Cirque Global, edited by Louis Patrick Leroux, like the previous book, with Charles R. Batson. It is subtitled Quebec's Expanding Circus Boundaries. This collection offers an overview of Quebec's circus scene, and it contextualizes it on the world stage. Many of the chapters, of course, are dedicated to Cirque du Soleil, analyzing its commercial success and its various shows through a variety of academic lenses. Another essay, though, by Charles Batson is on Les Sept Doigts de la Main, another major Quebec circus company, and on top of offering some compelling theory and history for the Canadian circus scholar like myself, this text also offers succinct definitions of circus terminology in a glossary at the end of the book. So that, along with these clear, beautiful photographs throughout the book, means that this book is interesting academically, but also serves as a great general reference if you're still getting to know the many circus disciplines. Louis Patrick Leroux's introduction to this volume also offers an overview of the emerging and interdisciplinary field of circus studies, specifically in Canada. So if you're interested in studying circus, then this book is a must-read. I will say that its focus is more on the new circus, or Nouveau Cirque, but its goal is to establish an academic field within circus so that future scholars and artists can build upon its foundation. This is one of the very first circus books that I read back in my master's in 2017, and I still think it's super relevant today. The final book that I want to mention in this section could be considered an introductory text, and maybe I should have included it in the beginner circus text section, but this one's a little bit harder to find and does take a particular focus on the Nordic countries and their relationship to contemporary circus, and that book is An Introduction to Contemporary Circus by Tommy Puravara, along with some other authors. This book is based on a previous book that Puravara wrote in Finnish in order to determine some common terminology that he can use to discuss the future of Finnish circus with artists, spectators, festival directors, and circus decision makers. This version of the book, though, also includes 4 sections specifically on Nordic contemporary circus, each by a different artist or artists. Those location-specific essays, though, are just the very final pages of this book. For the most part, this is a very broad, overarching history of circus and how Puravara thinks we arrived at contemporary circus, taking a particular focus on Western culture and European context. So the first part of this book isn't about contemporary circus itself, rather it's all of the historical events that Puravara thinks led up to the creation of contemporary circus. He offers many different ideas of historical lineages. My favorite thing about this book actually was his thoughts about the relationship between circus, theater, dance, and other performing arts in the mid-1900s, especially as film and TV emerged as popular mediums. So I think that there's a lot of really compelling and useful ideas about the history of circus in this book. That said, I didn't necessarily agree with all of them. For instance, he sort of opens the book by saying that circus is an ancient art form, the classic juggling is 4,000 years old, but then he also very explicitly says that circus started in 1768 with Philip Astley's Equestrian Circus. For my liking, that's just lacking a little bit of nuance to say that circus started in 1768 and then go and talk about circus all of the years preceding 1768. Maybe as circus artists we do this because what we now call circus skills are skills that have been practiced for thousands of years, and we are very proud of that fact and we want to claim those skills as our own. I'm not sure, but overall this is an excellent overview of the history of circus with an eye on contemporary circus. So if you are new to the field or you are particularly interested in circus in a Nordic context, then I highly recommend this book. It does seem to be mostly mostly out of print. However, I get word that there might be some copies available soon at the same place where I got my copy, so I'm going to drop that link below, and hopefully you'll be able to pick up this book if you're interested. Okay, finally, let's get into the really juicy stuff, the advanced contemporary circus texts. The first one that I want to draw your attention to is a beautiful art object in itself, and that is Thinking Through Circus. This was edited by Baca Levens, Sebastian Kahn, Quentin Kettles, and Vincent Fouquet. It's got a gorgeous purple cover with this like shiny green text on it, and even has a little ribbon so you can mark your place. The text inside is all green, a darker green, a lighter green. It uses different fonts and different formattings. So Baca Levens is a circus dramaturg and a theater scholar, and she launched the artistic research project called the Circus Dialogues at the Cask School of Arts in Ghent, and this book comes out of that project. It features the voices of more than 15 artists working in contemporary circus today. Each text in the book grounds itself in past and present contemporary circus performances, but one of the main through lines in this book is the idea that we do circus a disservice when we distinguish between thinking and doing. Rather, the editors argue, doing a circus practice is also a method of critical thinking in itself. There are a few ways this is made evident in the text. Personally, my favorite essay in this text is one that was previously published by Vincent Fouquet, originally titled Towards a Humble Circus, but in this book it is called Footnotes on Mastery. Fouquet invited 3 other circus thinkers to go through his text and include commentary on it in the margins. And those 3 footnotes come alive on the page using a direct address to the reader and investigating their own ontology and purpose as footnotes. One of the footnotes says, as a footnote, I could easily outlive you. I need no food, no water, no sunlight, but I also must acknowledge that I am partially what you call human. I am the hands that write me, the mouths that talk about me, the eyes that read me. If that's the case, then you must admit that you, in turn, are partially footnote. Does that mean that the footnote is also in part a circus artist? Making the act of footnoting partially a circus discipline? Making this book not just a literary product, but a circus product? Another important thing to note about this book is that the editors avoid defining circus at all. They discuss their individual and unique circus practices rather than circus in general, because defining what circus is automatically assumes what circus isn't. And they want to promote a sustainable and inclusive circus brimming with future potential. The writers of these texts put all of their passions and imaginations on the page, leaving the reader, especially if you're already interested in circus or practicing it yourself, super inspired to go and create more circus content. This next book is dedicated to one single circus company, dedicated to the first 25 years of their existence. It is the heaviest and the biggest book on this list, and that is Juggling Trajectories. Gandini Juggling from 1991 to 2015. Gandini Juggling was formed by juggler Sean Gandini and rhythmic gymnast Kati Lahokala after they both performed with Ra Ra Zoo, a new circus company in the 80s and 90s. The main goal of Gandini Juggling is to combine the artistic forms of juggling and contemporary dance, and a big influence on what they do was the invention of sight swap, a notation for juggling. Sight swap allows them to create almost juggling scores rather than juggling sequences or tricks like you might find in the traditional circus. Even if you don't pick up this book, if you ever see Gandini Juggling perform near you and they tour internationally, then I highly recommend going to see their show because it really is an educational experience. The juggling is clean and simple and often repetitive, and sometimes, as in their show Spring, which I saw at the Montreal Circus Festival, they will actually do things to assist the audience's comprehension of the juggling, like color code their props or state the sight swap numbers they are juggling out loud. It really feels like Gandini Juggling has developed a language of juggling over the years that they just keep adding onto with every show they create. So this book takes a deep dive into the history and theory behind a single new and contemporary circus company, which these days might be the best way to learn about circus because each artist within the contemporary circus has a totally unique way of working, as evidenced by the interviews in contemporary circus. Circus, the book I mentioned previously. If you're interested in circus and juggling, even if you don't know a lot about it, I think this is a beautiful book, and they have a run of hardcover copies. So if you're looking for a gorgeous coffee table book that also contains interviews and theoretical texts and glossaries and how-tos and show analyses and high-quality imagery, all centering on a new and contemporary circus company that is shaping the theater, dance, and circus spaces to this day, then I cannot recommend this book enough. This last text is also the lightest and the smallest text on this list, which I just had to include because my own writing is included in this collection, and that is Circus Thinks Reflections 2020, created and written by a number of people, including myself. This is a little publication that I created alongside 11 other contributors. We call ourselves the Circus Thinkers, and we were formed in 2020 by a circus arts organization in Lund, Sweden, called Circus Syd. Every week, myself and up to about 20 other circus thinkers from around the world get together and read circus texts and talk about them and think through them and then create material about our thoughts. The first book we ever read was John Paul Zaccarini's Falling, The Thought of Circus, and since then we've read Thinking Through Circus, some other books on this list, essays, dissertations, we've watched shows, we've spoken to circus artists who are working around the world today, and we even put out our own publication. The reason I put this in the advanced category is I really doubt that anybody that doesn't maybe know me or is already practicing circus themselves is going to pick this up. These texts came out of conversations that were happening between people who were already deep into the circus academic and artistic space. So it's a lot more personal, reflective, and artistic than some of the other texts on this list. My piece in this book is very short, and it's called Why I Juggle, and it reflects on the various reasons why I juggle. Every text in this book is so personal and so unique and so thought-provoking, and we had a graphic designer that created these gorgeous images throughout as well. So if you're interested in picking up this publication, I will include the link below. And we have already started working on a publication for 2022, so when that comes out, I'll let you know as well. There is your fall 2022 circus reading list. If you do use any of these books in like your fourth year independent study book list, let me know how that goes. And if you have a particular focus that you want to narrow in on in circus, I have read many more circus texts than this list, and I can probably recommend you some books or articles below. There is a lot of great stuff being published about circus online and in non-circus anthologies. I can't keep up with all of it either, so feel free to recommend more texts in the comment section of this video. Thank you for watching, everybody. I will see you in another video soon, and happy reading!